and welcome to English Literature with Susan. Today, I'm going to talk about Ezra Pound's Canto 1. The Cantos were a series of poems written by Ezra Pound, and they have the scope of an epic. Ezra Pound wanted to write a modern epic, and his modernist motto was to make it new. So he wanted to partly put himself on the chain of the epic writers in the history of literature, world literature, especially European classics. And on the other hand, he wants to make this epic new. So he wrote Canto 1 as the first part of his canto. It's a rather complicated poem. I try to explain its complex ideas, both the ones behind the poem and the ones just embedded in the text of the poem. So the opening of Pound's Cantos, Ezra Pound wrote to James Joyce that they are a long poem. He knew this is the beginning, but he explains to Joyce that I don't know where these poems are going to end. The complex poem of epic proportions in which he worked on for over 50 years is taken up through line 67. So this canto one, the first canto, starts from the line 67 with Pound's translation of the beginning of book 11 of Homer's Odyssey. So from here, from the first line of the poem to line 67 of this poem, written by Ezra Pound, we are actually reading a translation of Homer's Odyssey. And this is significant here. The very act is significant. First of all, the word canto means a poem, a performance, a song. So he wants to add a performative aspect to poetry, and also he's just introducing a translation of Homer. Homer is the father of European epics, the classical literature. His Iliad and Odyssey are the first step for everyone who wants to start to read the classicals. So Ezra Pound here in his modern epic starts with Odyssey. And there is a tradition in the epics that at the very beginning, the poet invokes the muses, for example, or someone as a source of inspiration, as someone who can just accompany the poet throughout the long task of writing such a long poem, such a long story, such a long narrative. So here, Ezra Pound is just following that tradition by invoking to Homer in his Odyssey, and it seems that here, Ezra in this part of the Odyssey, Odysseus is going to the underground to talk with Tiresias, and it seems that Ezra Pound has gone to the underground of literature to talk with a muse, to talk with a source of inspiration, this time Homer. So not directly from the Greek. And then this is interesting that Ezra Pound's translation is not translated from Greek to English, though he could do that. Rather, there is intermediary text which is written in Latin. So from the 16th century Latin translation of Andreas Divus. The other explanations about this work by Andreas Divus are included in the text of Ezra Pound's poem. And there is one thing very interesting about this poem. Ezra Pound has written this poem in alliterative verse. And alliterative verse, or the form of alliterative literature, alliterative poetry, belongs to Old and Middle English literature. And this is the very metric pattern of the great English epic Beowulf. So it seems that Ezra Pound is just localizing one of the greatest works of word literature into Anglophone literature. He's anglicizing Odyssey by introducing this form of writing, this metrical pattern to it. This is something very meaningful. He's making it new, and this time by localizing it and or embedding it into English literature. So this Canto 1 is not something to be just easily forgotten. Book 11 of Homer's Odyssey describes Odysseus' trip to the Underworld to consult the spirit of Tiresias, the blind Theban prophet, who will give him instructions for the final stages of his return to his home island Ithaca. After the siege of Troy and after the victory of the Spartans over the Trojans, Odysseus, one of the strategists of the whole time, the whole war and the besieging of Troy, wanted to come back home. His home was Ithaca, but he lost his way to home, and he was just living in this island, that island. He was entrapped by that cyclope or by that other weird beings. So he had lost the way to home, and by help of Circe, the sorcerer, now he's going to the underworld, the world of the dead, to consult Tiresias to find his way home. So Ezra Pound's Canto starts here, not not the very beginning, but in medias res. And we know one of the epic traditions is to start in medias res, start in the middle of the story, not in the beginning, and then we have just some throwbacks and flashbacks. And here, interestingly, Ezra Pound starts his own epic in medias res, while and actually we have a medias res within a medias res, because Odyssey itself, or the story of Odysseus, had started in medias res, and here we have just using the story in medias res to know Ezra Pound's narrative of it. And if you're interested in Ezra Pound's voice and his rehearsal is available on YouTube. I have really enjoyed it. He had rehearsed the poems in Old Man. There are some parts which do not match this text, but I've taken it from Northern Anthology for Poetry Fifth Edition. But Ezra Pound's reading is very interesting, or rehearsal, let's say. And the poem starts like this. This poem is very unique in the history of English poetry because it starts with and. It really literally begins in medias res and then went down to the ship. The poem starts with and it doesn't have a grammatical subject. Pound begins Canto 1 with a conjunction and without a grammatical subject, as if he continues the narration of the story which Homer had begun. He Ezra Pound is very interested in this, to see himself along the line of great historical figures in the world of literature. The narration of the story which Homer had begun, the subject of the sentence is Odysseus, but we don't know, and without this note we don't know exactly. So and then without knowing the story of Odyssey, without having Homer's Odyssey as our background knowledge, we cannot easily understand this. So and then went down to the ship. Odysseus and his men set keel to breakers. Keel is this part of a ship, set keel to breakers, and breakers means waves, long high waves. Forth on the godly sea, and we set up mast and sail on that sort ship. Mast is the central pillar in a ship, and we set up mast. The mast is actually used as a synecdoche for the ship, as parties representing the whole, and sail onto its sword ship. Sword is means from dark complexion. English language, especially Middle English, had close ties with German. Originally, English is a German language, or it belongs to the category of Germanic languages. And it might be interesting for you to know that in German, to call black, the color black, they use the word Schwarz. And here, Ezra Pound is using that old term for it. So he's not only setting the poem in the alliterative tradition of Middle English and Old English, but also he's using archaic words to show this interconnection. And if you're interested in that kind of illustration, you can check. For example, here we set up mast and sail, set up and sail that sword ship. It's just repeating itself, or worship aboard here, and our bodies also. You see, there are at least three words beginning with the same sound. Worship aboard. Bore here means to carry. Worship aboard here, and her bodies, and our bodies also, heavy with weeping and winds from sternward, winds from the rear part of the ship. and they are heavy with weeping because one of the men is not with them, Elpenor. They don't know what had happened to him, and also and they were in a trap actually, and but it seems that they kind of like it. Whereas out onward with bailing canvas, instead of using the term, actually the sails of a ship, Ezra Pound uses the kind of tapestry from which the sail is made of canvas. Circe's this craft. So all of these things, the ship, which are on the ship, the movement, the fast, smooth movement of the ship are what Circe the sorcerer has done. The Trimcoific goddess. Circe was the enchantress with whom Odysseus lived for over a year, and who told him to seek Tiresias' advice. Actually, the story was like that. That Circe was another trap for Odysseus when he was just finding his way home. This goddess knew the language of the animals, and she could just tame animals like pigs. And when Odysseus's men set foot on that island, she gave them some potions. She made them drink something, which turned them into pigs. And Odysseus, because he already knew his craft, was intact. But Circe, when she was not successful in that way, she used her feminine power to enchant Odysseus, and she was successful to just keep him there on that island for over a year. But Odysseus really insisted to come back home, and Cersei, although she was not consent because of her love of her, some kind of kindness, let him go. And Cersei has told him that she should go to the underworld to Hades, talk with Tiresias. So it is actually Cersei who has given him hints, to find his way back to home. Then sat we amidship. Then here we see the word we, but not Odysseus or Odysseus and his men. Then sat we amidships, and jamming the tiller. The ship is just moving fast. So push something roughly. Jamming means this is forcibly into position or space because there is a great wind in there. And a tiller is this one, a horizontal bar fitted to the head of a boat's rudder post and used for setting. You see, reading this poem is not that much easy because of the terminology, the words, the vocabulary used by Ezra Pound, and this is intentional. He's actually trying to set his poem somewhere in history of English literature. Thus, with a stretched sail, we went over sea till day's end. Sun to his slumber, shadows over the ocean, came we then to the bounds of the deepest water. They are moving against the direction of the sun. So the sun is somewhere, but they are just moving in a kind of opposite to that movement. So they are moving towards darkness. You see that the system, the solar system is totally different one at the time. The Cimmerian lands. Cimmeria was the borderline of the world. It was the border between this world and the underworld. The Cimmerias were mythic people living in darkness and mist on the farthest borders of the known world. Somewhere here, this is where Odysseus had traveled to. And Odyssey by Homer is a great work and unique in that in this work, the whole known world of the time of Homer is just covered. Odysseus and traveled everywhere, even not only to the places over the earth, but also the places under the earth. So Odyssey, as a work of literature, stands out in this way as well. And peopled cities covered with close-wrapped mist, unpierced ever with glitter of sunrays. So they are in the realm of darkness. Nor with stars stretched, nor looking back from heaven, shortest, darkest night stretched over wretched men there, and they're going to find their way to the underworld. the ocean flowing backward. This sentence is very sweet. Instead of saying that we just move towards the shore, he says the ocean flowing backward. The ocean was moving backwards so they could just move on to the shore. Came vegan to the place aforesaid by Circe. Here, did they write that there were a series of rituals so that before going to the underworld, it was not just moving to the underworld. Underworld was controlled by Hades or by Dis, the god of the underworld. He was Zeus's brother. He was very powerful. So you could not just go into his realm. You have to do something beforehand. There are a series of initiations, and here Odysseus and his men are doing these. Here did they rise Permetis and Eurylochus. These are Odysseus' men, two of them, and drawing sword from my hip. Again, Odysseus as a figure is absent, but we know by implication that this means Odysseus. And drawing sword from my hip, I dug the Ella square petkin. It was like the small square pet, if you're interested in the size, 1 or 45 inches on each side. So that they could pour the libations, pour the libations. Libations means a drink poured out as an offering to a deity. It's like an ointment. Poured the libations unto each the dead first made. Mead is an alcoholic drink made from fermented honey, and then sweet wine, water mixed with white flour. Flour because it's a sign of life. Then prayed I many prayer to the sickly death's heads. And then Odysseus himself does some prayer, as said in Ithaca, based on the traditions followed at the time in his homeland Ithaca. Straw bowls with the best for sacrifice, heaping the pyre with goods. They are putting everything as a sacrifice for the dead people and for the god of that and the world of the dead. Now, these trial bulls are young bulls, and that's a joke here. For a sacrifice, heaping the pyre, and heaping means to just put something over the other, and a pyre is something like a hill, a heap of combustible material, especially one for burning a corpse as part of a funeral ceremony. But here it's not a funeral. He's using the word pyre, and it might seem interesting to you if you know that this word is also used in Beowulf. So Ezra Pound is using these words intentionally. He's just connecting two cultures together. With goods, a sheep to Tiresias only, and then it comes. It is Tiresias' turn to have his sacrifice. The sheep, a black sheep is the lead sheep. That it is actually the best sheep here, which is sacrificed for Tiresias. Black and a bell sheep, dark blood flowed in the foss. A foss is a a place that water can just move. And here you can see the blind Tiresias. Also, the word foss means a narrow channel dug at the side of a road for field to hold or carry away water. But what do you see? Tiresias is blind here. There's a story behind this. Tiresias was a man when he was young and, of course, alive. He was just passing somewhere, and he saw two snakes copulating. And he saw them, he watched them. So they cursed him, and he turned into a woman, and his body turned into a body of a woman. And 7 years passed, and he again just moved in the same direction, in the same way. And he found the two snakes again copulating. So he knew that if this time he washes them, he would turn into a man. So he did so, and he was turned into a man. Okay, but those bodily parts of a female's body remained on him. For example, he had breasts, but they were dark. They were just very dry. It was not like a robust, healthy woman's body. But he could keep something from those 7 years. One day, there was a kind of let's say quarrel between the mother and father gods, Zeus and Hera. or Jove and Juno, if you like the Roman terminology, the names of these gods and goddesses. Anyway, and Hera believed that men are more passionate, lustful, in a sexual, sensual relationship, but Zeus believed the opposite. He thought that women are more passionate. So they asked for Tiresias because he had experienced both being a man and a woman. They asked Tiresias to come there and be their referee. And Tiresias, because he had experienced both being a man and a woman, he accepted Zeus's idea and he said women are more passionate. So Hera was very angry and she blinded Tiresias. And there is something in Greek mythology that a god cannot just undo another god's task. So Zeus could not just give his eyesight back, but instead he gave him the power of foreseeing things. So he became a seer. The eye of the head was now closed, but the eye of his heart was open with Zeus's help. And here, that's why actually Odysseus needs his help because he had that foreseeing of the future as his power. So souls out of Erebus, and they are doing this, and souls are coming out. Souls of Erebus, a dark place in the underworld, in the way to Hades. Cadaverous. Cadaverous means very pale, dead of brides, and the different dead people, different souls of the dead people, of brides, of youth, and of the old who had borne much, who had just stood a lot of dire situations, we can say, are coming out for to take something out of that sacrifice. Okay, uh, souls stained, and we have the description of the souls here. Souls stained with recent tears, girls tender, men many, mauled means wounded, but bronze lance heads, that they are just in there directly out of the battlefield, battle spoil, bearing it dreary arms. Dreary means bloody arms. They are very fresh from from this world to the other world, and they need these sacrifices. It gives them energy. These many crowded about me, but shouting pallor upon me. Pallor means pale, with a pale color. Cried to my man for more beasts, more sacrifice, slaughtered. But they have done everything. They have nothing to sacrifice anymore. Slaughtered the heroes, sheep slain of bronze, poured ointment, cried to the gods, and they have done everything. So these souls cannot have anything. They have sacrificed everything to Pluto, the strong and praised Proserpine. Pluto is that Hades, the god of the underworld, and his Roman name is this. So Roman name for Persephone, Proserpine, goddess of regeneration and wife of Pluto, Roman this, god of the underworld of Hades. So they were sacrificing everything to the king and the queen of the underworld so that they can let him in. And you can see here this or Pluto and also Persephone. Uh, she was Demeter's daughter, and she was just married to her uncle without her mother's consent, and her mother was very sad and depressed. Demeter was the goddess of nature. She was responsible for the seasonal cycle, but nothing happened. So, once in a year, Persephone could come out from this underworld to give her mother courage and energy. Anyway, our Proserpine is just living in there with Pluto, and the sacrifices are just done for this goddess and the other god. Unsheath the narrow sword. Odysseus is using force now. I sat to keep off the impetuous, impotent dead. He's moving forcefully the souls away till I should hear Tiresias, because he has a mission here. He's not there just for fun. He has to do something. But first, Elpenor, their friend, came before his being able to come down to the underworld. Elpenor, their lost friend, comes. Our friend Elpenor and Beard cast on the wide earth. Elpenor was the youngest of Odysseus' men. He had drunkenly fallen asleep on a loft on the eve of their departure from her island, Circe's island, and fell to his death when he tried to climb down a ladder. Uh, Unburied, cast on the white earth. Being unburied is very important. If you're not buried in the Greek mythology, then you cannot find your way to the underworld. So it's very important to be buried. And Elpenor is unburied, cast on the white earth, limbs that we left in the house of Circe, unwrapped in sepulchre, since toils urged other because they had other responsibilities and the situation. Circe was not certain about what she was doing, and Odysseus knew that, so they had to escape as soon as possible. So unwrapped and wrapped in sepulchre, since toils urged other. Pitiful spirit. And I cried in hard speech. I, the subject, actually, the referent of the grammatical subject here is Odysseus. Elpenor, how art thou came to this dark coast? Camest thou afoot? Outstripping seamen? Here, actually, Odysseus is making a joke with a dead person. How come you've arrived here earlier than us? Have you come? We have used the ship, but you've come on foot faster? And Alpeder seems to be indignant, and he in heavy speech with indignance. Ill-fate, an abandoned vine, is slept in Circe's angle. Angles means a corner. Going down the long ladder unguarded, I fell against the buttress. This is the buttress shatter the nape nerve, actually the back of a person's neck, the soul sort of Avernus, and my soul sort of Avernus. I was dead. Avernus was the name of a lake near Naples. It was believed that it is one of the entrances to the underworld, and this painting by William Turner shows on this lake. But thou, O king, I bid remember me. Unwrapped and buried, heap up mine arms. Be tomb, make a tomb for me. Be tomb by seaboard, by the seashore, and inscribed and write on my sepulchre, a man of no fortune, and with a name to come. He was very young when he was dead, and set my oar up that I song met fellows. So just use my aura to remember it, or it may mean that just put my oar over my sepulchre, my tomb, so that I would be remembered by this. And Anticleia came. In the journey to the underworld, Odysseus encounters his dead mother, Anticleia. It is Odysseus' mother, but according to the Odyssey, Odysseus wept at seeing her, but obeyed Circe's instruction to speak to no one until he had heard Tiresias. So it's important for Odysseus not to talk even to his mother at the time, whom I beat off. That he's forced to beat his mother off. And then Tiresias, Theban, holding his golden wand, this golden wand, this painting by William Blake shows this part, knew me and spoke first. A second time? Because when Tiresias was alive, Odysseus once again needed his consult, and this is a reference to that. Tiresias told Odysseus a second time, "Why, man of valorous star, facing the sunless dead in this joyless region, stand from the fosse, that narrow channel, leave me my bloody beaver, my drink. Let me just eat my drink, so that I can gain the energy to fortune telling, to tell you about the future, for soothsay, to soothsay, to tell about, make known future events by I if I want to do that supernatural act, I need this blood to be drunk and to just stand away so that I can do what I should. So now we know the reason for all those sacrifices. And I stepped back, Odysseus, and he, strong with the blood, said then, Odysseus, shalt return through spiteful Neptune over dark seas. Lose Neptune, of course, was the god of the seas. Lose all companions. This is what he sees in the future. Odysseus would find his way back home, but he will lose each and every of his companions. And then Anticleia came. This time Odysseus can talk with his mother. Lie quiet, Davis. And here we have just we are on line 67. The translation has ended, and here all of a sudden we hear Ezra Pound's voice. And this is really interesting how Ezra Pound just intrudes in the voice of Homer in this great story. Lie quiet, Divus. Divus was the translator from Greek to Latin. And throughout the poem, we have sometimes the pronoun I, but the reference to them was Odysseus. Here, the reference is not Odysseus, is Ezra Pound. And Ezra Pound is here to clarify himself. That is Andreas Divus in Officina Vecli, 1538 out of Homer. Here, actually, Ezra Pound provides us with the information of the book. The 16th century Italian, whose translation of the Odyssey had been published in Officina Vecli at the printing shop of Chrétien Vecchio, Paris in 1538. So it's like we've gone to a library and there was a card in the book and we see the information. And his sales by Sirens. And we're back to the story. So Ezra Pound just intruded into the story and then he's going to end it himself. And he sailed by Sirens and thence outward in a way then to Cersei. Actually, and they were supposed to come back to Cersei. After this visit to the Underworld, Odysseus returned to Cersei and then, forewarned by her, successfully sailed past the Sirens. Sirens were in Greek mythology were dangerous creatures who lured nearby sailors with their enchanting music and singing voice to shipwreck on the rocky coast of their island. And Circe had actually already told Odysseus what to do in order not to be sunk by the sirens, these beings, these creatures. Odysseus' men put wax into their ears so that they cannot hear the songs, and Odysseus wanted to listen to them. Odysseus is the only man in history who had ever listened to the sirens without being dead, because he ordered to just tie him to the mast of the ship, so that he cannot move. Uh, and then they passed the sirens, and he listened to them without doing anything dangerous. So we can move on. This part of the poem, this last part of the first canto of Ezra Pound, is not about Odysseus, but in the same version they had, actually Pound had available that the version we know its information we read its information in the previous stanza. And were accompanied by a series of other poems, hymns by Homer, and here Ezra Pound is translating them. Let me read this for you. Worthy of worship, Latin. These are the terms you're going to just see in these lines. He uses Latin expressions applied to Aphrodite. So here, all of a sudden, we move to Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, Greek goddess of love and beauty. This, like the Latin words and phrases in the next lines, derives from a Latin translation of two hymns to Aphrodite among the so-called Homeric hymns dating from the 8th to the 6th century BCE. This translation by Georgius Dortona Cretensis, the Cretin, line 73, if you remember, was contained in the volume in which Pound had found Divus's translation of the Odyssey. One hymn begins with the words that figure in Latin and the English in the closing line of the canto. Reverend, golden crowned, beautiful Aphrodite, I shall sing, who has received as her lot the citadels of oak, sea-grit cypress. So Ezra Pound is adding another fragment from the classical literature here, when random, that the great Aphrodite, in the Cretin's phrase, we read about it, with the golden crown Aphrodite, Sepri monumenta sortita est, mirthful Orichalci with golden girdles and brass bands. Orichalci means made out of copper. Aphrodite received earrings, flower shaped of copper in gold, and then like this, and girdles and brass bands. Then thou with dark eyelids, like this one, Aphrodite, bearing the golden bow of Argesida. So that. Okay, so that is the ending of this poem. This poem not only was unique because of its beginning and then, it also ends with so that semicolon. this is very interesting. That it seems that we after this sign, we expect something, a code or something, but nothing comes. So that now it's like that the gate of literature is now open. Is the poem is open beginning and open ending, we can say. So that and so that everything might just come out from this. And this is how Ezra Pound ends a poem. The canto ends on the colon. Sorry, I told you semicolon. Sorry, going immediately into Canto 2. So the poem doesn't have a proper beginning nor a proper ending. And this was my explanation of this poem, Canto 1 of Ezra Pound. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope I've given you enough information to understand this poem. And thank you very much for listening.